Law enforcement takes different forms around the world. If you go to the UK, Western Europe, and China, you'll see mass surveillance everywhere you go, which win on reach and scalability at the cost of privacy. In the US, you'll find a modest amount of cameras, but a massive presence of conventional boots on the ground policemen who are armed to the teeth. In America, policing is a $100 billion annual business that has grown in power for decades in a country with high gun ownership, weak infrastructure, archaic legislation, mass incarceration, and a society rooted in individualism, classism, and racial tensions. Yet these days, law enforcement agencies across the West are undergoing a shakeup from opaque, omnipotent, unchecked organizations into ones of transparency and accountability. Policing these days can be seen in the endless stream of body cam footage that lands on the internet. Whenever you watch those viral videos, look at the top right, and 10 times out of 10 it will say Axon, the one company that has made this revolution possible. In business theory, some say that great companies are not about flawless execution and perfect prediction of the future, as in reality, no organization at any scale can do either. Every company has dirty laundry, and no amount of capital can force the future, at least not a profitable one. This school of thought suggests that the most important ingredient to success in business is picking the right space to be in. You can tread water, develop expertise, and even make lots of mistakes along the way. But once the market trends in your direction, you can quickly capitalize on those tailwinds, find your footing, and snowball that momentum into billions of dollars. Axon is a modern embodiment of this theory. The company's rise can be broken down into 3 eras. In the 2000s, Axon was in its first era as a struggling, directionless single product startup that was under fire from the media, public, and politicians. Then, in the 2010s, a series of high-profile killings by law enforcement in the United States ignited nationwide protests, surfaced long-buried issues of discrimination and police brutality, and placed police around the world under the spotlight. American lawmakers, who were caught between the people that they serve and the police that they depend on, tried to seek neutrality in data. With public pressure for accountability, the demand for full-color, high-resolution footage and modern recording solutions skyrocketed, beyond static dash cams and the conventional grainy public surveillance. This demand was further amplified as several killings, like the shooting of Tamir Rice, ended without judgment as the public, the lawyers, and even federal investigators could not make sense of the little low-quality footage that was available. Incident recording went from a nice-to-have to a must-have, not just for police departments in the US, but also those abroad, as governments overseas face similar scrutiny about their own agencies and the absence of such data to drive accountability. These tailwinds propelled Axon, who had been building software and wearable technology, into its second era of prosperity in the 2010s. And as killings by law enforcement have persisted into the 2020s, political pressure has continued with global efforts to reform policing with greater emphasis on de-escalation, non-lethal force, and transparency over the traditional intimidation, oppression, and broken windows. Axon has held on to this rocket ship to its present-day era as a powerhouse, where every single interaction that happens every day with law enforcement is recorded with an Axon body cam and stored in Axon's cloud platform. In this episode, we'll cover the 3 eras of Axon and how this one company in 2 decades transformed from a struggling, directionless single-product startup into a critical hardware and software essential for revolutionizing law enforcement around the world. In the 2000s, Axon was in its first era of blunders and had a different name. The company was a small 200-person startup by the name of Taser International that manufactured and sold one product in tasers. Making one product is not a problem, as early-stage companies can really only afford to focus on one thing at a time, but this singular focus can be devastating if everyone happens to be calling for your product to be banned. While nowadays everyone enthusiastically endorses the use of tasers over guns and law enforcement to preserve life, this was not the case 20 years ago. Back in the 2000s, tasers were controversial. The idea of shocking a human through 50,000 volts of electricity was unacceptable to many. After a string of high-profile incidents where suspects died soon after being tasered, activists and watchdogs pounced, asserting that these deaths were part of a concerning national pattern, that the electricity caused cardiac arrests in the healthy human heart, and that tasers were just as dangerous as firearms. While the independent autopsies officially pinned the cause of death in many of these incidents to drug overdose, that didn't stop the media and public from pouring on their outrage and condemnation. The taxpayer pressure quickly snowballed into political scrutiny, and in the mid-2000s, Axon found itself in a storm of negative publicity that threatened the company's very existence. 26 states were in active judicial debates, and were considering legislation to ban tasers. The DOJ was closely monitoring the situation, and large cities like Chicago were suspending the use of tasers in their police forces, and the SEC had just opened an official investigation into Axon's product safety. It wasn't just city councils and regulators, but also individuals coming out to take down Axon. There were wrongful death lawsuits from surviving families that claimed that their loved ones would still be alive if they hadn't been tasered, and lawsuits from police officers who claimed that they suffered injuries after being tasered in training. And since someone generally needed to volunteer to be tasered during training, in order for the entire group to acquire the certification needed to carry tasers on the job, these lawsuits in particular flowed in at a high volume, attract greater negative publicity, and fan the flames of controversy. The premise of the taser had always been a straightforward sell as one of the few non-lethal options on the market for neutralizing a human being, but its effectiveness in the field has always been inconsistent. Tasers don't magically shoot electricity, rather they use compressed nitrogen to shoot out two metal darts. These darts have tips like fish hooks that are designed to pierce clothing and to embed themselves in the skin of the target, and they're connected to high-voltage insulated wires which then transmit the electricity from the taser into the target. The fundamental challenge is that both darts must penetrate and remain in the skin. If the target is moving around, if they're wearing thick or baggy clothing, if their arms are flailing around, if a strong wind happens to blow by, then a dart can miss, a wire can become entangled, a dart can get dislodged, and the connection won't be enough to disable the target. Tasers also have the flexibility to turn into a stun gun up close, but its main use case has always been about neutralizing threats at a distance. While firearms run on bullets, tasers run on cartridges. Each cartridge contains two darts, nitrogen, and wires and can only be fired once. And just like the taser itself, the cartridges are proprietary and sold separately. Axon had been on a positive trajectory, growing from $24 million to $67 million in net sales from 2003 to 2004 before sinking in 2005 amidst controversy. As a single product company, Axon's revenue could be easily broken down into its four SKUs: the Taser X26, the Advanced Taser, the Air Taser, and cartridges. The Taser X26 was the newest model that had been sold exclusively to law enforcement and corrections agencies for $799 and was designed for better dart penetration of clothing. The older Advanced Taser sold for $399. And the Air Taser was a discontinued model that had been designed exclusively for consumers but had failed to make any meaningful traction. Cartridges were sold at $16 a piece to law enforcement and $30 a piece to civilians. Cartridges alone were the second highest grossing product in the 2000s, accounting for a quarter of Axon's revenue every year. The negative press and political heat suddenly plunged Axon into a 3-year slump where business was effectively put on hold. Any tasers that were deployed in the field were put back on the shelf. America, by nature, is litigious, and Axon fought fire with fire, diverting millions to assemble its own in-house legal and medical teams, to save on outside counsel, to conduct its own scientific studies, and to send a message that there would be no easy settlements. While Axon eventually won as the medical science held up, that the courts ruled that tasers didn't cause 90% of the injuries or deaths, and the investigations were closed without judgment, these legal battles were numerous and drawn out over many years. In 2004, Axon had been named in 15 lawsuits. By 2007, that number was 49, and it was only until 2014 did the number of lawsuits dwindle back down to 16. And at that point, over 100 lawsuits had been dismissed in favor of Axon. Annual SG&A costs ballooned from $7 million a year in 2003 to well over $40 million by 2009, which was 8 to 15 times the company was spending on R&D. As a lean hardware startup, litigation alone decimated their bottom line into the single digits. This diversion was not only costly from the monetary sense, but also left the company confused in the direction that it should pursue. As the heat gradually faded away in the years after 2007, Axon recovered, but revenue continued to fluctuate as the US entered a recession. The consumer market had failed to show any meaningful progress, as later models in the 2000s, designed for private use like the C2, showed even less momentum as civilians opted for simpler and cheaper tools for self-defense like pepper spray. In the backdrop of the US invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, Axon decided to target the military for its growth. It was a market that was much bigger than law enforcement, that was not as complicated as a municipality, and was not as sensitive as the public. While the American military certainly had the dollars and the appetite to do business during a recession, Their demands were so exacting that it was impossible to satisfy. The military required wireless tasers that could shoot up to 100 yards, engineering feats that are impossible even 2 decades later. The best that Axon could come up with was a rail system where a soldier could attach an underbarrel taser to their rifle, similar to a bayonet or grenade launcher, a non-lethal landmine that never saw the light of day, the world's first ever electrified shotgun shell, and the Shockwave, a portable crowd control system that would shoot 24 tasers at the push of a button. The Shockwave was quietly discontinued after years of poor sales. The X-Rep shotgun shell was simply too expensive for anyone to use at $180 per shell, and the X26 remained the company's best-selling product throughout the 2000s. Law enforcement remained the bread and butter, but Axon had hit a ceiling. Taser was an established name brand, but growth was inconsistent as the weapon was perceived as viable but not essential for every officer, and Axon was just one vendor out of many. The tightening of budgets across the public sector made it difficult for Axon to sell, and internal R&D mistakes only exacerbated these challenges. Tasers had long been criticized for being unforgiving, where if the user missed their only shot, or if the dart failed to penetrate past the clothing, the weapon was basically useless. Few officers could afford to reload their taser if the threat was still coming at them. In response, Axon launched the X3, the first ever model that allowed a user to fire multiple shots before needing to reload, but the X3 was too bulky and heavy to fit on standard duty belts. The X3 ended up selling below expectations, the unsold inventory was discarded at a loss, and the older X26 model remained the far more popular option. After posting operating losses for 3 consecutive years, Axon desperately sought new sources of revenue. The military and civilian markets were clearly not sustainable. The company proposed that there were decent markets that were adjacent to law enforcement where the taser could be lifted and shifted to capture sales with little overhead, like animal control. Hilariously, the company stated that a wildlife-specific taser could become an essential purchase in places like Alaska or Africa, where governments have to deal with keeping large wild animals away from local populations. Axon's founder went so far as to publicly suggest that a taser could incapacitate a bear or other large predators, seemingly ignorant of the reality that tasers today were already not consistent at incapacitating humans, and that a charging bear is not something anyone should try to take down in the middle of winter with a single-shot, non-lethal battery-operated weapon. Thankfully, this idea and product was killed off as quickly as it was mentioned. To relieve public fears and to protect against taxpayer complaints, governments soon began demanding Axon to build accountability into the taser itself in order to ensure appropriate use of the weapon. Law enforcement leaders followed this mandate from their political superiors, as it was ultimately these local lawmakers that approved their budgets. To comply, Axon built the Taser Cam, a backwards-compatible $400 accessory that would record video and audio even in low light. But a live demonstration was not enough. It became a hard requirement for several major agencies that every taser be outfitted with a Taser Cam before it could be deployed and used by any officer. The same rigor existed overseas. The highly desirable and strategic French National Police and Gendarmerie made it clear that no adoption of tasers would be considered without Taser Cam. For a startup stretched in so many different directions and struggling to execute, the Taser Cam itself was a brilliant piece of engineering. The accessory could record up to an hour of local video and audio, and most importantly, officers never had to hit a record button. As soon as an officer switched off the safety on their taser, the Taser Cam would automatically start recording, capturing what was happening in the moments before, during, and after the taser was fired. Negative publicity, lawsuits, political scrutiny, R&D mistakes, failed products, lack of growth, and now a regulatory pressure for a camera were all challenges that Axon endured in its first era. Yet many of these problems had more to do with the immaturity and inexperience of the company rather than poor leadership and negligence. Axon's blunders in the 2000s were painful lessons that would in hindsight plant the necessary seeds for the future and spurred the company onto an era of prosperity in the 2010s. Axon emerged from the 2000s with plenty of scar tissue and a better understanding of how to build products. The company overhauled its product development processes and required continuous validation from real-world law enforcement during the design of every product and not after. This reduced manufacturing risk and ensured a better reception of newer Taser models on their launch, like the double-shot X2 and the ultra-small X26P, which both outsold the X3 by a significant margin. And despite the regulatory mandate, Taser cams were more of a compliance add-on than anything else and contributed less than 5% of the company's annual revenue in the 2010s. Yet what Taser cams taught Axon was that video would be useful not just in the rare moments in which a taser was deployed, but really in any law enforcement encounter. The rush to stick cameras onto tasers had introduced new unaddressed issues like data extraction and management. The videos on each taser cam had to be manually exported, the data was piling up into mountains of gigabytes, and no one had really thought through where these digital files should be stored, how long these files should be kept, how to protect this data against manipulation, how to back up this data, and how to organize it all in a world still ruled by pen and paper. These unaddressed problems were Axon's opportunities. In 2010, Axon launched ATC and Evidence.com, the company's first ever wearable hardware and software product. Police officers could wear ATC as a headcam that would capture audio and video on a 10-hour battery and even included a separate touchscreen display for real-time playback in the field. Evidence.com was a turnkey service where agencies could upload and manage the footage from their taser cams and ATCs without having to worry about storage, security, and manipulation, with Axon providing the clear chain of custody for each file. Evidence.com was not some innovative feat of engineering. From a tech stack perspective, it was just a custom interface sitting in front of AWS S3. But for many agencies, Evidence.com was their first ever exposure to cloud infrastructure. As is the case with all first-generation hardware, the ergonomics of ATC left a lot to be desired. The company went through multiple iterations in an attempt to find the right blend of comfort and convenience that would convince officers to put cameras on their heads in the early 2010s. At the time, there was no political pressure for this kind of recording or accountability. Law enforcement agencies weren't against the idea of wearing cameras, but they also didn't see the impetus or have the urgency to adopt. Quote, "The important point here is that the value prop that we've put forth has been very well received. We're seeing a near universal acceptance that these types of systems are coming. I cannot recall a customer that we have met that has disputed that this is the future. They all recognize that video systems are coming and believe they will be standard issue for every officer in the future. Obviously, however, there are some different viewpoints on how long that process will take. There were some early adopters who saw the value of Axon's newest products in helping modernize evidence rooms and reducing case prep time and protecting officers against false complaints, but these progressive police chiefs were few and far between. From a distance, there wasn't much data to suggest that this path would have a big payout. Both of Axon's products launched with very little fanfare and generated less than $1 million in sales in their first 2 years, as the company found selling software to be a lot more complicated than selling tasers. But at this point, Axon had built up enough expertise within the space to feel confident that they were onto something, even if they hadn't quite nailed the implementation yet. Quote, "Our new products clearly have the potential to be comparable or frankly significantly larger than our core taser business. We continue to believe in these signs in the market, and we believe that as we look back in a few years, this will have been an excellent opportunity for our business to have moved into. It leverages our core business relationships in law enforcement, our core training capabilities, our hardware innovation, and our new software development capabilities that we have built for the last few years." Yet not every police officer carried a taser, not every taser had a taser cam, and not every taser with a taser cam was fired. Evidence.com improved quickly through the 2010s as Axon turned their product into a single pane of glass. The company added tagging, geospatial mapping, customizable retention policies, better playback, multimedia search, and opened up the platform to ingest digital files from any and all sources. Axon continued to make mistakes along the way, but because the company was building in a space that no one else was looking into, these mistakes were invaluable and helped them ship better products. Axon realized that it made no sense for them to be building wearable computers and wearable cameras at the same time, so touchscreen displays were scrapped from future iterations of the ATC. When headcams failed to catch on, Axon tried mounting the camera on glasses instead with Axon Flex, pushing that the resolution and POV captured at eye level would be superior to any conventional body cam or dash cam. Axon Flex only generated $4 to $6 million a year in sales, but this was still progress. After much experimentation and a lack of acceptance for any other form factor, Axon settled for building the best body cameras it could. Demand suddenly skyrocketed in the mid-2010s as the killings of Michael Brown and others created urgency for such technology overnight, At this point, Axon's body cameras were so far ahead of its competition, they could be customized to automatically start recording when sirens were activated, when doors were opened, or when a gun was removed from a holster. Axon's differentiation from its competition was that it was providing a connected hardware and a managed software solution as a single vendor, not just one or the other. Axon's products were managed modular services and not the conventional, complicated, fragile, monolithic on-prem software of traditional vendors. Even when Google Glass came out, the company didn't lose any sleep. Quote, "The progression towards cloud computing and wearable technology is actually faster than we had previously anticipated. We strongly feel that the long-term play here is not with the cameras and the hardware, but rather with the cloud platform evidence.com. If an agency chooses to use Google Glass or any other hardware to collect evidence, they're still going to need a digital evidence management system, and evidence.com is the most flexible and accommodating system to handle digital evidence from multiple sources. To paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's not the camera, stupid, it's the backend, and that's where we're focused." Axon's revenue soared from $90 million a year in 2011 to $530 million by 2019. Evidence.com alone climbed from $30 million in 2010 to a $130 million cloud business by 2019, which was more money than the company made selling cartridges or any single Taser model. Body cameras surged from a $4 million business in 2015 to a $44 million business by 2019, and at this point, the greater software and sensors market was making as much money as the overall Taser business. While product improvements and direction were integral, these strong results would not have been possible without an improved go-to-market strategy. At this point, Axon had over a decade of experience selling to agencies to understand all the dynamics and variables needed to close a deal. Profitability was strong in this second era of prosperity, with a healthy bottom line and a clear allocation towards future investment. Now in present day, Axon is in its most dominant era as an essential for modern law enforcement around the world. Scrutiny of police has only intensified to record levels in this decade, with the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many more. Political pressure for police reform has followed, with municipalities, lawmakers, and police chiefs now all being held under the microscope to bring greater transparency and oversight through technology. Sales of body cameras have doubled from $57 million in 2020 to over $124 million by 2022. Evidence.com has doubled from a $176 million software business in 2020 to $371 million in 2022, with no advertising required. Axon's moat has proven to be far more robust than just attaching cameras to police officers. Data extraction, ingestion, and management has proven to be untenable for the few agencies still rolling their own DIY solution. Any organization still manually exporting videos, clipping locally, and storing them in Google Drive or on local servers have found themselves running back to Axon. Axon's transformation into a suite of hardware and software solutions has enabled diverse strategies to market penetration. Law enforcement is not homogeneous, as each agency has its own needs. Small agencies that police small towns or rural areas are generally more interested in tasers, as their officers tend to be closer with their communities and the risk of complaints is lower and the opportunity cost of a lethal incident is higher. On the flip side, large agencies responsible for major cities are more interested in body cams, as the greater transient populations naturally bring a higher probability of incidents and complaints. Axon's overall revenue has grown from $680 million to $1.2 billion in just 2 years. And despite a 20 to 30% growth year over year in the overall Taser segment, models and cartridge sales have contributed less and less to the company's top line. Tasers might seem like an afterthought, but the weapon has remained a top 3 bestseller in the 2020s. Axon has continued to make the Taser more effective, with the goal of one day matching the stopping power of a standard issue 9mm handgun. While Tasers are now widely accepted by the public, they're still not seen as essential by agencies. The largest and most well-funded police department in the United States, that costs over $10 billion every year, doesn't see the need for every officer to carry a Taser. Instead, the NYPD, like many major police forces, has an allotment of Tasers that it shares amongst a subset of officers. This gives Axon the confidence that with the right innovation, there's ample room for growth in Tasers on a unit basis. The Taser 10 features better clothing penetration and allows a user to fire up to 10 individual shots on a single cartridge, where only 2 of those shots are needed to land in order to incapacitate the target. Software and sensors has become the majority contributor to Axon's revenue, doubling in 3 years from $314 million in 2020 to $658 million by 2022. The fastest growing product within this segment is Axon Fleet, which is the company's first product built for state agencies like the CHP. While state troopers in theory need tasers and body cams like everyone else, they have a greater need for in-car ALPRs. ALPRs are automated license plate readers, which are essential for highway police to identify who's who in a sea of cars. ALPRs have existed for many years, but they were historically dedicated systems that cost $20,000 to $30,000 up front, which was a luxury that only a few agencies could afford for just a handful of cars in their fleets. Axon Fleet, in comparison, is sold at a fraction of that cost for $200 per month per vehicle, which is inclusive of the hardware and software. Axon Fleet doubles as both a dashcam and ALPR, and all of the video footage recorded there naturally flows into evidence.com for storage, processing, and retrieval. Having made a long-desired technology available at a drastically lower price point, Axon Fleet has grown from $3 million in sales at launch in 2017 to over $60 million by 2022. Over 90% of Axon's customers today are on a subscription plan. The Officer Safety Plan is the company's most popular bundle, where agencies can get a taser, a body cam, a license for evidence.com, unlimited storage, and full warranty coverage for $99 to $239 per month per officer. While this high-end comprehensive plan fits the large agencies, the small agencies with tighter budgets have access to cheaper bundles that are body camera only, taser only, or have less tiers of storage. Bundling enables Axon to monetize both ends of the market with easy-to-understand value-based pricing, to fly through procurement as a predictable and consistent expense, and to fit flexibly into any government's budget, things that the company learned through trial and error in its first era. While Axon wins with a recurring revenue model that Wall Street loves, subscription customers also benefit by being on a hardware refresh cycles where all their tasers are upgraded every 5 years and body cameras every 2.5. Cartridges, however, are not included in subscriptions. Sales of Taser cartridges continue to account for 15 to 18% of Axon's overall revenue every year. With progress in computer vision and machine learning, Axon believes that evidence.com can become just more than a repository of video footage. Axon envisions a future that all law enforcement would gladly welcome, in which officers spend more time in the field and less time behind a desk. All an officer would have to do is to wear their body camera, to upload those videos onto evidence.com, and the software platform would soon be able to transcribe dialogue, to flag every key moment like swearing, yelling, fighting, weapon discharge, and then pre-populate a police report with all that data. There's also another world where evidence.com moves up the chain from just boots on the ground law enforcement and into the greater criminal justice system as a platform for state and federal prosecutors. The evolution of evidence.com is like a page straight out of the Silicon Valley playbook. You start with a moat in hardware, you expand that moat to software, and then all the data that you own as an aggregator becomes a valuable and defensible platform with network effects. Newer products like Axon Respond, where a police officer can live stream what's happening from their body cam back to dispatch, carry even greater promise of revolutionizing law enforcement. In a recent school shooting, an officer's Axon body cam live streamed the situation on the ground to a command center. When the suspect was subdued, the command center was able to see the situation unfold and call off the SWAT teams in real time. But in a traditional system where the only information available would be in lagging audio updates over radio, the SWAT teams would have likely rushed in and caused even more chaos at the scene. The final interesting angle about Axon is that the company has embraced its tailwinds to craft a new identity for itself as a pacifist, as an advocate of both civil rights and law enforcement, as a leader in police reform, and a uniquely profitable tech company. In a time where Silicon Valley companies are demanding workers to return to office, Axon is doing the opposite, pushing its fully remote job opportunities with the tagline "Work Anywhere, Save Lives" to win engineering talent from a predominantly liberal workforce. The 3 eras of Axon make for a fascinating case study and an observation that perhaps everyone in business is too obsessed with being a trendsetter and predicting the future. Axon is a prime example of a company that chose a space and they paid their tax. Their first era in the 2000s was filled with painful lessons and blunders that were exacerbated by immaturity and inexperience. But every challenge and mistake that decade taught Axon how to better execute, how to sell, how to design, and how to build, which were all unquantifiable, unseen advantages that its competitors did not have. And if it weren't for the regulatory mandate to add cameras to tasers, the company may not have ever found the inspiration or success that it enjoys today. One bad apple spoils the bunch, and killings, brutality, and corruption in law enforcement were well known issues that had been happening for decades, long before George Floyd and Michael Brown. No company, not even Axon in the early 2010s, could have foreseen such a rapid and dramatic change in public opinion towards policing, along with political demand towards accountability in law enforcement. Even when all the tailwinds were finally on its side, Axon still didn't get things right the first time. The company spent many cycles trying to push headcams and sunglasses before accepting that reinventing the proven form factor of body cams was unnecessary. Axon's success today, almost like Mr. Beast and YouTube, can be fundamentally attributed to the reality that the company simply worked longer and harder in the space than anyone else, and by virtue developed the expertise and perspective to build solutions for problems that no one else was thinking about. In the private sector, the path to success is often muddled as you're constantly trying to pattern match across thousands of potential buyers. You're incentivized to build walled gardens to reduce the naturally high churn and to protect retention. In the public sector, the path to success is a much slower burn filled with bureaucracy, but on the flip side, you compete on merit and greater clarity with clearly defined processes, needs, and stakeholders. What Axon has accomplished in 2 decades is amazing, but what it did to achieve that success was not anything remarkable. It made its share of mistakes, it took its lumps, and the company was better because of it. In business and in life, there is no shortcut to success. You can chase trends as they appear with the rest of the herd, or you can pick a space, commit to it, and pay the tax. There's no way of knowing when the winds will blow in your direction, but when they do, you'll be so far ahead that you get to capitalize in ways that others can't. The world is full of the unexpected, and it's not the stereotypical Silicon Valley unicorn, but instead a humble, Arizona-based company with fewer employees than Reddit that is revolutionizing law enforcement around the world.